Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, you name it, all across the world of crypto and blockchain. And today I have another amazing guest. Looking forward to this interview. I have a founding contributor at Puffer. His name is Amir Forouzani. Amir, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jamil.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. So let's kick things off and I ask you the first question I ask everybody. It's what is your background and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Absolutely. I believe as the founding team at Puffer, we have the technical knowledge of how the most basic of things, the computers work. We were hardware engineers to begin with. We have focused on initially onboarding AI into the blockchain back in the year 2021. Basically, yeah, 2021. It was before the GPT hype. Of course, like the AI was this sort of like very unknown field at that time to at least the public. So we tried to actually onboard AI into the blockchain and solve a lot of existing like primitives that are lacking within AI, like confidentiality, credible neutrality, and also like data protection. We realized then that blockchain isn't ready for it. There are a lot that to be said around the readiness of this infrastructure to support such a user experience, including blockchain being slow, not being decentralized enough, and many other like aspects of it that were lacking at the time. So we actually started to use our background and use our existing expertise, including, for example, our expertise in trusted execution environments and TEEs, to not only secure Ethereum validation side to make running Ethereum validators more viable and therefore contributing to the decentralization of the Ethereum network, but also taking that and like a next level essentially to speed up the rollups and actually like create like a foundation to what like sort of like the base rollups are going to be today. And that one like was part of our other research. So we did two pivotal researches at Puffer to prepare us for today, and that was anti-slashers and also our collaborative research with Justin Drake of Ethereum Foundation, which was initially called 2FA for ZK rollups that are called multi-provers today. These are the two sort of like foundational pieces of like what we launched as a staking and then restaking product. And further, we were like taking that even into based rollups and based sequencing that are becoming the next new paradigm of how we're going to bring fast transactions to Ethereum.
So before you were at Puffer, what were you doing?
I was an engineer at NASA Jet Propulsion Labs.
That's very cool. Yeah, you got to be really smart to be there. So, um, very cool. So Puffer and Unify, what's the relationship between the two, Puffer and Unify, and what are they both? And like, what's the distinction? And what are the vision and mission?
Absolutely. Puffer itself, Puffer Finance or Puffer, it began with actually wanting to focus on decentralizing and enhancing the credible neutrality of Ethereum network, and therefore just essentially like guaranteeing the security of the network. How did we do it? By allowing permissionless staking and restaking. What does that mean? It means like anyone who wants to run an Ethereum validator can do so efficiently through Puffer with very low bond instead of the 32 ETH original bond. And anyone who wants to stake can participate in this. So we created this trustless system that connects stakers with hardware operators and professionals that can actually communicate with each other. And there is no really, the whole system is governance minimized, where we don't pick who runs the node really through governance, or we don't pick who gets to stake through governance. Rather, we made it like Ethereum. It's permissionless. Anyone can run a node, anyone can stake. So that was our initial like product, like our number one product. Of course, this nodes that are permissionlessly participating in Puffer are then restaked to provide security for any other infrastructure. Imagine actually like using the same amount of ETH that is securing the Ethereum chain to secure other paradigms of infrastructure. So that's Puffer. What Puffer Unify is a based rollup that its sequencing is done through this credibly neutral set of validators on Ethereum. Based rollups and based sequencing started from this research that Justin Drake started. Maybe I'll just do a demystification to begin with. This is completely disconnected with Coinbase's base. That's just the name, L2 called base. That's an LP chain. Based rollups, the idea is to achieve composability, there has to be either shared sequencing or decentralized sequencing at some point in these super app chains or any like a stack of L2s. But however, the base shared sequencer can be Ethereum validators themselves. Therefore, if you bring all the rollups to use this based sequencing layer, all these rollups would be then composable to each other. Current pain points of the rollup landscape on Ethereum is the liquidity fragmentation. All the big companies, big chains sort of are focusing on creating their own smaller islands of liquidity and saying that all these rollups are interoperable with each other only. Let's say if you want to go from rollup stack A to rollup stack B, there is no way in the future for it. However, in this based rollup future, you would solve this fragmentation and you would solve for essentially this negative sum game that we're right now going after in the current L2 existing landscape. You bring all the rollups to be sequenced by the many Ethereum validators that itself to be able to provide the composability that we much need with the existing landscape of Ethereum.
All right, so I'm gonna pause 1 second here, and so tell you I've heard of base rollups. I've heard of ZK rollups, right? What's the difference between and if there's any other rollups, what are the difference between them?
Yes, so initially, like the beginning of time, we started with optimistic rollups. That sort of like the users would interact with it by submitting a transaction. The users would get a soft confirmation that their transaction would be included in the future on the Ethereum blockchain or on this L2 as well. And they would use data availability layer of Ethereum itself to include these transactions in the future. Now, each of these actually rollups need a prover system. They need to be proved to prove to the user that the transactions, everything were done essentially correctly, the blocks were built correctly, and for example, no censorship happened. Optimistic stacks started by introducing this paradigm called fraud proofs, where the user gets a week to actually like essentially challenge, let's say, certain malicious activity on these optimistic rollups. And that's why it takes us 7 days to withdraw from an optimistic rollup back to Ethereum L1, or essentially bridge it back. So then we went to this, thanks to research, this other paradigm was introduced, zero knowledge rollups or ZK rollups. Actually, they're not zero knowledge, rather they're using the verifiable computation part of zero knowledge. Not going to dive too deep into the technical weeds of this, but essentially it provides more mathematical guarantees of that the proof is done right, the transactions were included correctly, and there was no censorship or malicious act in here involved. Rather than trusting this centralized sequencer that runs a computer, we trust math. We trust proofs that this was done correctly. However, today, of course, like these proving systems still can use a lot more optimization. We don't have immediate like atomic composability with Ethereum L1. This has in a huge way, like made it more like faster to kind of like not wait for 7 days, but still we have to wait for hours. This is also quite costly today to submit these proofs and batch these proofs. But at the same time, like based sequencing and based rollups, I would say can live in parallel with existing stacks. It is not really a switch from OP to ZK. It's rather a switch from centralized sequencing to based sequencing. Both OP, optimistic, or ZK rollups, they both actually have sequencers that work on actually creating transactions and for users, creating like blocks and proposing blocks for the users. But this is done centralized. Essentially, one entity runs them, and users have to trust to run them. That's why it's hard to get composability because let's say we have an optimistic stack A, optimistic stack B. They would like to talk to each other. There's almost no way right now. I know it's been researched, it's been worked how to create composability between the two of this, but it is hard. It's quite challenging to do so. At the same time, there's no optimistic stack that can talk to, let's say, a ZK stack, right? That they're living in two different universes. And if we just continue building liquidity on these rollups, essentially we're creating smaller islands and we're really fragmenting the liquidity. The idea that can bring and unify all of these together is as if they use a unified shared sequencer, a set of computers that actually construct these transactions together, and therefore they can be trusted to actually update each other with each other's state. That's where based rollup and based sequencing come to play. We say, okay, we have an Ethereum validator set. They're already natively building the blocks on the Ethereum L1. Why shouldn't they be able to sequence the transactions for these rollups as well? So in this future of rollup centric future of Ethereum, which we also call app chain future, all these app chains can communicate with each other immediately. And they can communicate with the Ethereum L1 immediately as well, because it's running by the same Ethereum validators. That's sort of the differentiation now between like optimistic, ZK, and based. So to sum it up, it's they can exist. It's not like based is in like hard, it's more orthogonal to what optimistic and ZK are. It can be like used in both.
Got it. So I'm going to paint a picture for my listeners. Make sure I got this right. Ethereum virtual machine is the base layer of everything. That's like a giant circle that's under the hood. And you got the three different pillars. One is optimistic rollups. One is ZK rollups. One is based. They're siloed. They're all, you could look at first. They'd be siloed. They're all siloed. The base, however, helps with decentralized the sequencing, and then also having communication between the silos.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. I get it. I understand now. So, I believe
the reason we call Puffer Unify is because you're eventually finally unifying all these rollups, the entire Ethereum together. So that's why like the first based rollup that we're creating, we're called Puffer Unify.
Got it. That sounds about right. So, let me ask you this. There are currently challenges other than just this that are faced by the Ethereum developer community and the users. You're just scratching the surface, but how do we begin to dive into those challenges? I know I saw a whole bunch of EIP, standards that were proposed. Like, what's the state of that, and how do you begin to address these challenges?
Of course, I think like there are a variety of challenges that Ethereum, like that, as Vitalik mentions all the time as well. There is like lack of automation to dealing with, for example, 51% attacks. There is also existing EIPs that we are working on to increase maximum effective balance on Ethereum, or essentially like many other things that can like there's PeerDAS that can also improve Ethereum UX and Ethereum in general. There is like different paradigms of account abstraction / chain abstraction that can help. But I would say like these specific based rollups, based sequencing is an out of protocol improvement that doesn't have to wait for a hard work from Ethereum. So like And at Puffer, we're like a big fan of these ones, right? Because we sort of like didn't wait for like in protocol implementation of, for example, hardware-based anti-slashers and built it. We're more like an out of protocol upgraders, like rather like, okay, let's create an ecosystem, let's create an out of protocol upgrade till Ethereum EIPs get to catch up themselves. Because oftentimes hard forking the main chain itself is such a challenging thing. We have to now bring like the whole community together. Let's hard fork, let's do an upgrade. Rather us, we want to like deliver upgrades out of protocol to actually like make sure like things work well and more smoothly. And that's where these base rollups, base sequencing comes in. There exists an existing challenge of liquidity fragmentation. And that's how we're solving it through Unify with out of protocol improvements.
Liquidity fragmentation. What are the issues with? I get is it the yield returning thing, or what are the benefits of improving that fragmentation?
So right now, like I mentioned, with the existing rollup centric roadmap, with the existing winner take all narrative that is going around, it's a negative sum game that, let's say, certain rollup or certain rollup stack win, and they build liquidity in their small island, and they start competing with each other without being able to communicate with each other or bringing that liquidity back to the users. This is like, I'll give a small example. Let's say we end up in a world that a rollup has an Aave, and we end up in a world that a rollup has a Uniswap. If a liquidation hits on an Aave on rollup A, and we would like to, I don't know, an LP wants to take action on that on a Uniswap, there is no way that these two can be reflected because these are so disjointed. Effectively, we even fragmented our users itself, not only liquidity, right? Of course, like your answer can be like, oh, why don't you do it on the L1? Because L1 is expensive. We want to be able to do all our transactions, all the millions of dollars that are spent on gas on a rollup that is more efficient, that is batched, that is more compressed transaction style. That's where we're creating this ultimate fragmentation of liquidity, which is a negative sum game for Ethereum.
Got it. So then I'm confused then. You're redirecting sequencing fees back to Ethereum's layer one then, right? What are the benefits of that?
So what we're doing here is actually like the MAV is being redirected back to the Ethereum validators itself. Rather, like the congestion fee can still remain at the sequencer layer itself. Let's say like there are a bunch of congestion fees that Coinbase's base like right now is gathering. All of that would almost stay the same. But the important part is now the MEV is being extracted by the Ethereum L1 validators itself. Why is that good? Of course, like if an Ethereum L1 validator makes more money, it means that it's more viable to running an Ethereum valuable. And ultimately, more viability means more security for the network itself, right? More APR and more security for the network itself. On top of that, there is a question of economic alignment. We have introduced like EIP 1559, where it does a gas burn. Essentially, a portion of the gas that has been used to do transactions on Ethereum L1 is being burnt. That it is going to be the deflationary side of things. While right now, staking is an inflationary or issuance side of things. If we would like to keep ETH itself also as deflationary as possible, we would like the transactions to be hitting the ETH L1 validators. That's where we get to also keep the ultrasoundness effect on the Ethereum itself.
So it's really a balancing game between deflation and inflation, and then you are working to foster a more interoperable blockchain environment. So how do you strike that balance and unify liquidity and dApps across Ethereum?
Yeah, I think they work hand in hand in parallel. It's not something that it's a balancing act. the more we get people to adopt the Puffer Unify stack in terms of running their based rollups, the more we get to solve for liquidity fragmentation, and at the same time, we get more economic alignment with the Ethereum L1 itself. So really, we're bringing it all in one platter, right? Like it's not a fight against each other. I mean, there are more actually more benefits to this, not only economic alignment or liquidity fragmentation. There's liveness as well. Like if Ethereum validators are actually doing sequencing for these rollups, it means that if, let's say, validator X goes down, there is 900,000 more validators to pick up on that transaction. And as you know, for a lot of alt L1s, liveness has been an ongoing challenge, as well as for L2s as well. So we're going to have 100% liveness on these rollups. We're going to have credible neutrality, which is one of the most important parts for many dApps that are building. For example, ENS right now. It's going to cost a lot of money, essentially, like moving forward, to also like submit an ENS domain for users. But if it was on a rollup, it would have been much nicer. The biggest challenge for today's ENS to move to an existing L2 stack is credible neutrality. They don't want like sort of like a centralized sequencer to be running their rollup. They don't want their rollup to be managed by a token or a multi-sig sort of that way. They want it to have 100% liveness, and at the same time, they want it to be credibly neutral. So really, this based rollup and based sequencing narrative is like implementation is actually bringing a lot of positive things to the whole industry.
So critical neutrality would mean, like, for those who heard it for the first time, what would that entail? What would that mean?
Credible neutrality means there wouldn't be a censorship happening on like including like someone's activity, regardless of like where the sort of like transaction is like generated. It's like oftentimes credible neutrality is a big challenge for sequencers, because sometimes imagine if a centralized sequencer says, oh, I wouldn't include your transaction. I would rather go, this is a nice trade you got here. I'm going to censor your transaction and I'm going to go to trade myself. That's a very easiest example of this. Is like, oh my God, like I'm getting this, let's say, token at a really nice price, and I put in a nice trade for it. But then the sequencer who sees your transaction says, oh, wow, like that's going to generate me a lot of income too. Why do you have to do it? I'll do it by censoring your transaction and replacing your transaction with mine. That's a very simple example of censorship as sort of in the format of like centralized settings.
Got it. Thank you. So you said something. You said an acronym I haven't heard in a while, maybe a couple of years. You said ENS. You know, I just want to get a lay of the land of what the ENS situation is and where we're headed.
Yes, I mean, ENS is really here to stay. It's definitely like Ethereum name service was one of the really like great things that came to be one of the first, we can call it in this space, OG protocols that started providing services for folks. Existing way of like how they like these domains are being registered are actually quite costly on the L1 itself and being maintained. So they would like to have a platform that saves them a lot of these costs. And that's where things are heading. And I believe everybody still holds their ENS domain, like, and a lot of people are interested in spinning up more ENS domains as well. So, and I believe that would be quite beneficial for them, at least in the roadmap, in the context of like actually like moving forward with adopting ENS more.
I think I still have some. I haven't looked at it in a few years, but I think I have them. So I want to find out from you. We have a phenomenon coming up and pretty soon here in the U.S. called ETFs. There's already have Bitcoin ETFs, but like Ethereum ETFs. You know, how do you see that playing out, and what do you see coming down, you know, the pike for the rest of the year and the next year as far as ETFs, and what are the benefits?
Absolutely. I mean, this is like sort of a great signal to everyone else to see like, okay, finally, like this is a legitimate technology Hey, thank you for everybody else, for regulator, for catching up on this, that this is legitimate. We do need this sort of like technology to actually advance our financial paradigm, or our like essentially the entire financial ecosystem, because like very dependent on tech, and technology means advancement of like humanity, and this would play a big role in that. And that was a massive like stamp of approval that like, hey, like regardless of our differences, regardless of like if we have like other differences, this technology is here to stay. And that's also like a great notion to everyone in America, like because America is always has been at the forefront of technology. And I really like to hear that this was approved and this is getting like pushed, actually, because you have to stay in the forefront of technology always. So yeah, for us, what it means for Puffer, as you know, Puffer is backed by some of these ETF, how would I say, like applications, including Avon, investment arm of Fidelity, and as well as Franklin Templeton's investment. And they're both like interested in pursuing these. Of course, we have Coinbase as one of our backers as well. So all these like US entities are now seriously like would like to enter into the realm of blockchain, and specifically programmable money, which is Ethereum. And programmable money means that we can finally deliver better financial sort of like applications to users and worldwide. That's what the like instantiated this excitement. And I believe we would we're looking forward to actually continue our collaboration with them and exploring and expanding on that as well at Puffin.
I could see that. I definitely see that. So these ETFs call on board. You're working with these organizations. You want to bring on the next retail user. Retail kind of got scared away in the past couple of years. How do you bring them back? And then how do you help them understand what you can do and what the possibilities are for them?
Yeah, so there are two things that we're really going after at Puffer. We want to make things trustless. You don't have to trust me sort of as one of the founding contributors. You don't have to trust anybody else who's a core at Puffer to actually trust the system. That's the key thing about being trustless. A system has to be designed that it wouldn't be based on reputation. It has to either, like I mentioned initially, has to be based on math. It has to be based on hardware. It hasn't to be based on like any person who's sitting behind the computer to say, oh, like I'm going to screw over the retail and customers. That's our initial approach, to be like, okay, sorry guys, like some other guys messed up, but you're going to design this system in a way that you don't have to trust a human in this process anymore. It's more like trusting protocol, trusting cryptography, trusting math. That's what is called a trustless system, that you don't have to base everything on reputation. Another big thing that we're working on to onboarding these next, like all the retail users, even institutional users, is like, hey, the infra at Ethereum might not be just ready yet because of high gas costs, slowness, which is the 12-second slowness of a block time. Let's us at this like foundational level, which is Ethereum validators, improve that for you. That's where we introduced based rollups and base sequencing that take advantage of, again, I'm going to drop another name here, called pre-confirmations. As I mentioned initially, soft confirmation was a fast way that the L2s today like guarantee their users for including their transaction on Ethereum. Pre-confirmations are a much stronger guarantee and faster even of users' transactions being included in Ethereum, like in orders of like 100 milliseconds, for example. And we go from 12 second to 100 millisecond, massive improvement already. He essentially, like, that's where at Puffer, to sum it up, we made it trustless, so you don't have to be trusted. It can be just math, it can be computers, it can be other things, and we made it faster and better in terms of user experience for interactions for the users, and cheaper, of course, through the based rollups. So we focused and solve all the existing problems that users faced or are facing to actually onboard these new users.
Sounds wonderful to me. I like that 12 seconds to 1,000 or millionth of or the thousandth of a second. So I think that's great. You know, yeah, very cool. So I want to thank you. Um,
Thank you.
this has been a great conversation. I learned a lot today. So I want to thank you very much for speaking with me today. I enjoyed speaking with you. And I have one last question then. It's easy. How can people find
Absolutely.
out about you, about Puffer, about Unify? How can they start using, you know, how can they do that?
Absolutely. Go to puffer.fi, follow our socials, puffer_finance on Twitter. We do provide a newsletter, a very nice detailed newsletter on Medium as well. Follow us, puffer_fi at Medium as well. And basically all our links are on Twitter right now. So go find them. There are certain actions you can take. We have ongoing campaigns that called quest.puffer.fi. That's our quest that incentivize initial participants and Puffers staking and restaking. Very soon, exciting stuff around Unify are coming out. That's unify.puffer.fi. That you can participate as a user also. But if you're a dev, you're curious about building on rollups, you're curious about app chains and base sequencing, also go to unify.puffer.fi, check out our light paper. That also does explain how the flow of things work. And we hope to have their dApps and their ecosystems also on this based rollup.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Emil.